I never thought the day I'd be betrayed would be the day I signed the biggest client contract in company history. But there he stood, my boss, before the board of directors, stealing every ounce of glory, leaving me drowning in his shadow. I didn't cry. I learned not to react, but to act. 4 months later, he was fired. The company lost $5.1 million. I was the reason. My name is Kara Hunt, and at 34, I'd clawed my way up to lead strategy analyst at a Merlinks Group, one of Denver's premier financial consulting firms. No silver spoon, no Ivy League pedigree, just a state school diploma and the kind of determination that makes you skip lunch to perfect a presentation nobody will remember your name on. The Merlinks Tower pierced downtown Denver's skyline like a glass needle, 42 floors of ambition wrapped in steel and testosterone. I'd spent 6 years learning its unwritten rules. Arrive before your boss, leave after him, and never, ever expect credit where credit is due. Not if you're a woman. Our floor, the 38th, housed the Strategic Development Division. Picture this: 23 analysts, 19 of them men. The breakroom conversations revolved around golf handicaps and strip club recommendations. I'd learned to pour my coffee quickly and retreat to my desk, invisible as furniture. Then there was Craig Darnell, 45, silver-haired, with the kind of smile that made female interns uncomfortable and male executives feel safe. As deputy executive director, he controlled our division like a feudal lord. He wore his feminism like a Rolex, flashy, expensive, and completely for show. "Kara, you're exactly what this company needs," he told me during my first week on his team. Fresh perspective, different thinking. His hand had lingered on my shoulder a beat too long. I'm all about empowering women in finance. That was 3 years ago. Since then, I'd watched him promote Brad, Kyle, and Marcus, all competent, none exceptional. Meanwhile, I'd restructured our entire analytical framework, landed 3 major clients, and saved the company $2.3 million in redundant operations. My reward? A cost of living adjustment and a pat on the head. But I played the game, smiled in meetings where my ideas became collaborative efforts, nodded when Craig explained my own strategies back to me, simplified for the board's understanding. I'd learned that anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not yet. Every morning, I'd stand at my window, coffee in hand, watching Denver wake up below. The city hummed with possibility, with chances I'd never quite grasp. In the reflection, I'd see myself, blazer sharp, expression sharper. A woman built for boardrooms that would never quite let her in. The men had their Thursday night whiskey tastings, their weekend golf tournaments, their casual mentions of ski trips where real decisions got made. I had my spreadsheets, my precision, and the growing certainty that merit alone would never be enough. Some nights, I'd stay until the cleaning crew arrived, perfecting reports that would bear Craig's signature. They knew me by name: Maria, who'd fled Guatemala; James, working nights to pay for his daughter's medical school. We were all invisible in our own ways, keeping the machine running for those who'd never acknowledge we existed. "Why do you stay?" Maria asked once, emptying my trash bin at 11 p.m. I'd looked up from my screen, seeing myself in her tired eyes. "Because somewhere in this tower, there's a door with my name on it. I just haven't found the right key." What I didn't know then was that I'd been looking for the wrong kind of key entirely. Sometimes, the best way through a door isn't to unlock it, it's to blow it off its hinges. The Osprey project started with a hunch and a pot of burnt coffee at 2 a.m. I'd been analyzing market trends in the Southwest region when the patterns jumped out at me. A massive, untapped opportunity in renewable energy infrastructure financing. While everyone chased tech startups and crypto ventures, traditional industries were hemorrhaging value, desperate for restructuring. It was a goldmine hiding in plain sight. For 4 months, I lived and breathed Osprey. My apartment became a second office, walls covered in market projections and competitor analyses. I recruited Malik, the only analyst who'd ever backed me in meetings. And together we built something extraordinary. Financial models that sang. Risk assessments tighter than Fort Knox. a client acquisition strategy that could net Amerlinks $50 million in the first year alone. The Southwest data was beautiful. Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, all sitting on renewable resources their industries couldn't afford to harness. Our restructuring plan would bridge that gap, creating a new investment vehicle that benefited everyone. I'd never created anything more elegant, more profitable, more perfectly suited to Amerlinks's capabilities. "This is it," Malik said one night, reviewing our final presentation. "This is the one that changes everything for you." I believed him. God help me. I actually believed him. The morning I finished Osprey, Craig summoned me to his office. Corner suite, of course, with views that made you forget Denver's winter gray. He was practicing his putting, a habit that screamed, "I have so much power, I can waste your time." "Kara, heard you've been burning the midnight oil." He didn't look up from his putter. "What's got you so excited?" I pitched Osprey in broad strokes, watching his eyes sharpen with each detail. The numbers made him set down his golf club. The projected returns made him lean forward. By the time I finished, he was practically salivating. "Brilliant work," he said, and for once, it sounded genuine. "When's the presentation ready?" "It's ready now. I was hoping to present at Thursday's Strategic Council meeting." "Actually," he smiled that Rolex smile. "Better idea. Present it to me first. Full dress rehearsal. I want to make sure it's absolutely perfect before it goes to the board. Can't have any surprises, right?" My stomach clenched, but I kept my face neutral. "Of course. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., just you and me. Bring everything, slides, financials, implementation timeline. I want to see it all." I should have known. Should have seen the trap in his eager eyes. But I was drunk on my own ambition, high on the possibility that finally, my work would speak for itself. That night, I polished every slide until they gleamed. Practiced my delivery until every word was perfect. Malik offered to come with me, but Craig had been specific, just the two of us. The next morning, I arrived at 6:45, materials pristine, confidence armor-plated. Craig was already there, coffee in hand, smile wider than usual. "Let's see what you've got, superstar." For 90 minutes, I gave the performance of my life. Every question he asked, I had an answer, every concern, a solution. I watched him take notes, saw his excitement build. When I finished, the silence stretched like taffy. "This is extraordinary, Kara." He stood, pacing to the window. "Absolutely extraordinary. The board is going to lose their minds." "Thank you, I'm ready to present on Thursday." "Actually, slight change of plans." He turned, backlit by morning sun. "The board moved their meeting to this afternoon. Emergency session. Something about quarterly projections." My heart sank. "This afternoon, but I have the Brennan account review, which is why I'll handle the initial presentation." He walked over, placed a paternal hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry, I'll make sure they know this is your baby. Once I get them excited, we'll bring you in for the deep dive. Team effort, right?" The words tasted like ash. "Craig, I really think..." "Kara." His grip tightened slightly. "Trust me. I've been doing this for 20 years. Sometimes you need the right messenger for the message. We'll get Osprey approved, then you'll lead the implementation. That's where the real credit comes anyway." I had two choices: fight and lose, or comply and hope. I chose hope. I handed over my materials, my months of work, my future, my stupid fucking hope, and watched him tuck them under his arm like a newspaper. "You're a team player, Kara. That's why you're going places." The boardroom doors closed at 2 p.m. that afternoon. I wasn't invited inside. I sat at my desk, watching the clock, waiting for my summons. It never came. At 4:47, the company-wide email arrived. Subject line: "Exciting new strategic initiative." Craig's name at the top. My Osprey. Now his triumph. Not a single mention of my name. Not even in the footnotes. I read it 3 times, each word a scalpel between my ribs. Around me, the office buzzed with excitement. The board had approved everything. Craig was a visionary. Amerlinks was about to revolutionize Southwest infrastructure investment. Malik appeared at my desk, face twisted with rage. Kara, what the fuck? Not here, I whispered, my voice surprisingly steady. Not now. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the wall still covered in Osprey's bones. 4 months of my life. My breakthrough. My key to every locked door. Gone. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I poured a glass of wine and made a decision. Craig Darnell had taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. In this game, there were no rules except the ones you enforced yourself. It was time to enforce some new rules. The week after Craig stole Osprey, he reassigned me to operational efficiency reviews, corporate speak for busy work designed to break your spirit. I spent my days auditing expense reports and updating compliance manuals while watching him parade through the office, accepting congratulations for his vision. I need you focused on the fundamentals, he'd said, that practiced concern creasing his forehead. All this strategic work might have been overwhelming you. Let's dial it back, help you build a stronger foundation. I smiled and nodded, playing the grateful subordinate learning her place. Inside, something had crystallized, hard and cold as Denver winter. The first crack in Craig's facade appeared 3 weeks later. I was working late, genuinely this time, not performing dedication, when I heard his voice carrying from the conference room. The walls on 38 were thin if you knew where to listen. The numbers need to be more aggressive, he was saying. Bump the projections by 30%. But, Craig... Another voice, Henderson from Acquisitions. The Southwest infrastructure capacity won't support. Make it support. We've got institutional investors circling. They want to see 9 figures by year 3. We show them 9 figures. My fingers stilled on the keyboard. I knew those projections. Hell. I'd built them, stress-tested them, refined them until they were bulletproof. Inflating them by 30% wasn't aggressive. It was fraudulent. I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Coffee runs became intelligence missions. Printer maintenance became document review. I learned that invisible women see everything. And Craig had forgotten I existed the moment he'd stolen my work. The pattern emerged slowly. Craig wasn't just inflating Osprey's projections, he was fundamentally altering the investment structure. Where I'd designed safeguards, he saw impediments. Where I'd built in transparency, he created opacity. He was turning my elegant solution into a house of cards, and he was selling it to pension funds and municipal investors who couldn't afford to lose. You look tired, Malik said one afternoon, finding me in the break room at my usual time, 3:17, when Craig had his daily leadership call. Just processing. I stirred my coffee slowly, considering how much to reveal. You know the Osprey implementation? Something's off. His jaw tightened. You mean besides the fact that asshole stole it? I mean the numbers. They don't match my original models. Malik leaned in, lowering his voice. How different? Different enough that when this implodes, and it will implode, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money. We stood in silence, both understanding the implications. In finance, theft was personal, fraud was systemic, one destroyed careers, the other destroyed lives. What are you going to do? He asked. I met his eyes, seeing my own reflection in their concern. I'm going to keep doing my operational efficiency reviews, very, very efficiently. That night, I created a new email account from a coffee shop Wi-Fi across town, started a cloud drive accessible only through a VPN, began documenting everything, dates, times, overheard conversations, mathematical impossibilities in the published projections. The rage that had burned hot in those first days cooled into something more useful. Precise. Patient. I'd learned that in corporate America. The best revenge wasn't served cold, it was served with documentation. Craig, drunk on his own success, grew careless. He sent emails from his personal account to mine, asking me to clean up some numbers for investor presentations. He had me sit in on calls where he casually instructed teams to bury negative indicators in footnotes. He treated me like furniture, forgetting that furniture doesn't have memory, doesn't take notes, doesn't carefully preserve every communication with metadata intact. One evening, I found myself alone in the office with Maria, the night cleaner I'd known for years. "You look different," she said, emptying my trash. "Not sad anymore. Something else." I glanced at my screen, then back at her. "What do I look like?" She studied me with eyes that had seen revolution, immigration, survival. Like my cousin in Guatemala, right before she turned in the man who killed her husband to the federales. Did she get justice? Maria's smile was sharp as broken glass. She got something better. She got proof. I worked in the shadows for 2 months, building my case like I'd built Osprey, methodically, comprehensively, irrefutably. I learned that Craig had incorporated shell companies to hide kickbacks, that he was promises returns that would require cooking books on a massive scale, that when Osprey failed, and it would fail within 18 months at this trajectory, Amerlinks would be left holding a $5.1 million liability. Minimum. But knowing and proving were different animals. I needed something more than circumstantial evidence and overheard conversations. I needed Craig to hand me the rope himself. The opportunity came in month 3. Craig called me into his office, sweat beading his upper lip despite the air conditioning. "Kara, I need your help with something sensitive." I sat, notepad ready, playing the eager assistant he'd reduced me to. "Of course. There's been some confusion about the Osprey projections. Some of the board members are asking questions." "Yo, what kind of questions?" He shifted in his leather chair, the squeak betraying his nerves. "Technical questions about the underlying mathematics, the kind of details only someone who really understands the models could answer." The irony was so thick I could taste it. "You need me to explain my own work to defend your lies," hung unspoken between us. "I'm happy to help," I said smoothly. "What specifically do they want to know?" For the next hour, Craig outlined every fraudulent change he'd made, every inflated projection, every hidden risk. He needed me to create documentation that would make his fiction look like fact, and he needed it in writing, needed my analysis to cover his tracks when the board came calling. "Can you handle this?" he asked, desperation leaking through his executive veneer. I met his eyes, letting him see exactly what he expected, a beaten woman grateful for any scrap of relevance. "I'll take care of everything, Craig." He visibly relaxed, that Rolex smile returning. "I knew I could count on you. You're a team player, Kara. That's what I've always liked about you." Walking back to my desk, I felt the weight of the trap I'd just set. Craig wanted me to help him lie to the board, in writing, creating a paper trail that would lead directly back to him when the truth emerged. I sat down at my computer and began typing the most important document of my career. Not the lies he wanted, but the truth he'd just confessed, wrapped in enough technical language to pass his cursory review. The real question was, who would I send it to when the time was right? The coffee shop in Lodo was the kind of place where lawyers met whistleblowers, dim lighting, white noise machines, and baristas who minded their own business. I sat in the back corner, watching the door until she arrived. Rebecca Chen, no relation despite the name, looked like she'd stepped out of a law firm catalog. Severe black suit, silver briefcase, eyes that had seen every corporate sin imaginable. She worked for EchoNet, a legal collective that specialized in protecting employees who exposed corporate fraud. "Ms. Hunt," she said, sliding into the opposite booth. "I've reviewed your initial documentation. We need to talk about your options." "I want him destroyed," I said, surprised by my own candor. Her smile was thin as paper. "Revenge is expensive. Justice, however, can be quite profitable." She explained the whistleblower provisions, SEC rewards for exposing financial fraud, the protections and risks. But what caught my attention was her advice on evidence gathering. "Everything you've collected is good, but it's not enough. We need direct evidence of fraudulent intent, documented chains of command, proof that senior leadership knew or should have known." She slid a folder across the table. "These are the legal methods for obtaining such evidence." I spent the next hour learning about single-party consent recording laws in Colorado, legal email retention policies, and the fine line between whistleblowing and corporate espionage. Rebecca taught me to be surgical, precise cuts that would stand up in court, not the messy hacking of a vengeful employee. One more thing, she said as we prepared to leave. You're not alone. EchoNet has a network. Women in finance who've been where you are. They're watching, and they're willing to help. That network became my lifeline. Anonymous forums where female analysts shared intel. Secure channels where we compared notes on systemic discrimination. I learned that Craig had a pattern. 3 other women, 3 other stolen projects, 3 other careers derailed. But I was the first, with proof. Sarah from compliance reached out through encrypted messages. Heard you're documenting irregularities in Osprey. The audit committee is starting to ask questions. If someone were to accidentally leave certain reports in the shared drive. Linda from IT was more direct. Craig's been sloppy with his personal device usage on company networks. Privacy policies are clear about monitoring for fraud prevention. Just saying. Even Margaret, the 60-year-old executive assistant who'd worked 38 floors for 2 decades, found ways to help. Mr. Darnell's calendar is quite full, she'd say loudly whenever Craig scheduled meetings about Osprey. Perhaps Ms. Hunt could take notes, given her familiarity with the technical details. We were an invisible army, bound by shared experience and mutual protection. Each of us had been diminished, overlooked, stolen from, together. We were building something Craig couldn't see coming. I started recording every interaction, legally and carefully. Colorado's one-party consent law meant I could capture Craig's admissions, his casual instructions to commit fraud, his increasingly desperate attempts to cover his tracks. My phone became a weapon, hidden in blazer pockets and purse linings. The breakthrough came during a late-night strategy session. Craig had been drinking, not enough to be obviously impaired, but enough to loosen his tongue. You know what your problem is, Kara? He said, gesturing with his whiskey glass. You think too small. Osprey could have been huge, but you played it safe. That's why I had to enhance it. Enhance it? I kept my voice neutral, phone recording in my pocket. The projections, the structure, all of it. You built a Toyota when the board wanted a Ferrari, so I gave them a Ferrari. But the fundamental mathematics. Fuck the mathematics, he laughed, the sound sharp in the empty office. You think anyone on that board understands the math? They understand returns. I promised them returns. What happens when reality doesn't match the promises? He shrugged, refilling his glass from the bottle he kept in his desk. We'll be 3 years out, bonuses collected, stock options vested. If it crashes, we blame market conditions. That's the game. Kara. That's why you'll never make it to the top. You don't understand the game. I understood the game perfectly. I just played by different rules. Working with Rebecca and the EchoNet team. I built my case methodically. Every document Craig asked me to falsify, I preserved in 2 versions, the lies he wanted and the truth underneath. Every meeting where he discussed cooking books, I recorded. Every email where he implicated himself, I archived. But I also played the long game in other ways. I volunteered for the Corporate Social Responsibility Committee, building relationships with board members' assistants. I attended every optional training, every networking event, every place where I could quietly rebuild my reputation while Craig thought I was broken. You're different, Milik said one day, watching me prepare for yet another compliance review meeting. It's like you're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. I learned from the best, I replied, thinking of Maria the cleaner, Rebecca the lawyer, and the network of women who'd taught me that justice wasn't given, it was taken. The final piece of my plan required technology. Through EchoNet, I connected with a forensic accountant who specialized in financial modeling. She taught me how to create parallel projections, one set showing Craig's fraudulent numbers, another showing what would actually happen when reality hit. When this crashes, she said, reviewing my work, Amerlinks will lose everything they've invested plus penalties. We're talking $5.1 million. Minimum, maybe more. Good, I said, and meant it. By month 4, I had everything. Recorded confessions, documented fraud, email trails, and financial projections that would make any prosecutor salivate. But I also had something more valuable, a network of women who'd been waiting for someone to finally fight back. When do we move? Sarah asked during one of our encrypted chats. Soon, I promised. But first, I need Craig to do one more thing. I need him to put the final nail in his own coffin. The trap was set. The players were in position. All I needed now was for Craig to be himself, arrogant, careless, and absolutely certain that he'd already won. He had no idea that the game had changed, and he was about to lose everything. The anonymous tip to the SEC went out at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I sent it from a coffee shop in Aurora, using a laptop I'd bought with cash and would destroy after. The package was comprehensive. 247 pages of evidence, financial models, recorded conversations, and a roadmap of exactly where to find the bodies Craig had buried. But that was just the opening move. The real trap required Craig to incriminate himself one final time, with no room for plausible deniability. I crafted the email carefully, each word designed to trigger his desperation. Craig, I've been reviewing the Osprey portfolio projections for the Q3 board presentation. And I'm concerned. The infrastructure capacity reports from New Mexico show significant shortfalls against our promised returns. We need to discuss how to address this before the auditors notice the discrepancies. I've attached my analysis. Kara. The attachment was a work of art, surface level. It looked like a helpful warning from a loyal employee. But embedded in the data were breadcrumbs that led directly to every fraudulent adjustment he'd made. If Craig was smart, he'd see the trap. But I was counting on his arrogance to blind him. His response came within an hour. Kara, meet me in conference room C at 6 p.m. tonight. Come alone, bring all your materials. We need to align our stories before this becomes a problem. Delete this email. CD, delete this email. I smiled, taking screenshots, preserving metadata, documenting everything. He just admitted consciousness of guilt in writing. At 5:45 p.m., I walked into conference room C with 2 laptops, a recorder in my blazer pocket, and my phone set to back up audio to the cloud. Craig was already there, pacing, sweat staining his expensive shirt. Shut the door, he snapped. We have a problem. We do, I agreed, settling into my chair with practiced calm. The New Mexico numbers don't lie. Craig, we're looking at a 40% shortfall by Q4. Fuck the real numbers. He slammed his hand on the table. I need you to make them work. Change the infrastructure assessments, modify the capacity algorithms, whatever it takes. That would be fraud, I said evenly. It's creative accounting. Everyone does it. He leaned forward, desperation replacing his usual smugness. Listen, Kara, we're in this together. Osprey was your baby. Until you stole it. The words hung between us like a blade. Craig's face cycled through surprise, anger, and finally, calculation. Fine. You want credit? Fix this mess, and I'll make sure you're recognized. Senior analyst position. Your name on the next project. Real ownership. I want it in writing. After you fix the numbers. I pulled out my laptop. Fingers flying across the keyboard. I'll need your authorization codes to modify the core projections. The system logs every change. He hesitated, then recited his codes. I entered them carefully, narrating each step for the recording. I'm accessing the Osprey master file. Entering your authorization. Modifying the infrastructure projections as requested. Good. Make it show 15% growth minimum. That's impossible with real data. Then use unreal data. He was almost screaming now. Jesus Christ, Kara, do I have to spell it out? Fake the fucking numbers. There it was, clear, unambiguous, undeniable. I'll need that in an email, I said, for the audit trail. He grabbed his phone, typing furiously. The email hit my inbox seconds later. Kara, per our discussion, Use whatever means necessary to adjust the Osprey projections to show minimum 15% growth. I take full responsibility for this directive. Craig Darnell, Deputy Executive Director. I read it twice, then looked up at him. This email explicitly asked me to commit fraud. It asks you to save both our asses, he snarled. Now do it. I closed my laptop slowly. No. What? No. Craig, I won't fake the numbers. I won't help you defraud investors. And I won't be your scapegoat when this house of cards collapses. His face went purple. You'll do what I tell you, or you'll be gone by morning. Actually, I said, standing and gathering my things. I don't think I will. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh. And Craig? You might want to check with legal about Colorado's recording consent laws. One-party consent is a beautiful thing. The color drained from his face as the implications hit. I left him there, mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Back at my desk, I worked quickly. The email chain with Craig's explicit fraud instructions went to 3 places: my lawyer, the SEC's secure upload portal, and a time-delayed send to Amerlinx's entire board of directors, set to deliver in 72 hours unless I canceled it. Then I sent one final email, this time to Amerlinx's chief compliance officer, copying the head of internal audit. Dear Ms. Richardson, I am writing to report serious financial irregularities in the Osprey Infrastructure Investment Project. I have documented evidence of deliberate fraud, including tonight's written directive from Craig Darnell to falsify financial projections. As required by company policy and federal law, I am reporting this matter immediately. I have also filed a complaint with the SEC under whistleblower provisions. Supporting documentation is attached. Kara Hunt. The dice were cast. There was no walking this back. No return to the shadow existence I'd accepted for so long. Either Craig would fall, or I would. But I had something Craig didn't. Proof. Patience, and a network of women who'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. My phone buzzed. Rebecca from EchoNet. SEC confirm receipt, expedited investigation approved. Are you ready for what comes next? I looked around the office where I'd been invisible for so long. At the desk where I'd swallowed my pride and ambition. At the executive floor where men like Craig made millions off the work of women like me. I've been ready for years, I texted back. Within an hour, my email had triggered a cascade. Compliance locked down all Osprey files. The audit committee called an emergency meeting. Craig's access to financial systems was suspended pending investigation. I sat at my desk, calm in the eye of the storm I'd created. Tomorrow, the war would begin in earnest. Tonight, I finally did what I should have done months ago. I went home on time. The unraveling began with a single email marked urgent. All staff meeting, mandatory attendance. I arrived early, choosing a seat in the middle rows where I could observe without being observed. The boardroom filled with nervous energy, whispers rippling through the crowd like wind through wheat. Craig's absence was a presence unto itself. Richard Blackstone, chairman of the board, took the podium. His face looked carved from granite, eyes scanning the room like a predator identifying prey. Effective immediately, Craig Darnell has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation into serious financial irregularities within the Osprey project. The room erupted. I kept my expression neutral, even as satisfaction bloomed in my chest like ice flowers. The SEC has opened a formal investigation? Blackstone continued. Internal audit has discovered systematic falsification of projections that exposed Amerlinx to catastrophic liability. We are cooperating fully with authorities. Over the following weeks, Craig's empire crumbled piece by piece. The forensic accountants I'd secretly consulted were right. The real exposure was $5.1 million, plus penalties, plus the incoming lawsuits from investors who'd been sold fraudulent projections. I was called into 17 different meetings. SEC investigators, internal auditors, compliance officers, legal counsel. Each time, I presented my evidence with clinical precision, The recordings were damning. The email trail was undeniable. Craig's own authorization codes on every fraudulent entry sealed his fate. "How long have you known about this?" the lead SEC investigator asked during one session. "I began documenting irregularities 4 months ago," I replied. "When my concerns were dismissed internally, I felt obligated to report through proper channels. What I didn't say, I'd spent those 4 months building a case so airtight that Craig's high-powered lawyers couldn't find a single crack. The media got wind of it in week 3. Denver financial firm faces $5.1 million fraud scandal, ran across the business section. My name stayed out of the papers, whistleblower protections held, but everyone at Amerlinks knew. The looks ranged from respect to fear to barely concealed rage from Craig's golf buddies. Sarah from compliance stopped by my desk one morning. "They're cleaning house," she whispered. "Henderson from acquisitions. Gone. The entire Osprey team. Under review. Craig's trying to claim you set him up." "Did I?" I asked, meeting her eyes. She smiled. "Honey, all you did was hand him rope. He's the one who made a noose." The final board meeting happened on a Thursday. I wasn't supposed to be there, but Margaret made sure I received a misfiled invitation. I sat in the back, watching Craig try to defend himself. He looked smaller somehow, his expensive suit hanging loose, his silver hair dulled. His lawyers argued entrapment, coercion, misunderstanding. Then they played my recordings. Craig's own voice filled the room. "Fake the fucking numbers." The board's decision was unanimous. Termination for cause. No severance, no golden parachute. Full cooperation with criminal prosecution. As security escorted him out, Craig caught sight of me. The rage in his eyes could have melted steel. But beneath it, I saw something else. Recognition. He finally understood that the furniture had been taking notes all along. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Amerlink's stock dropped 18%. The Osprey project was scrapped entirely, written off as a $5.1 million loss. 3 board members resigned. The SEC levied additional fines for compliance failures. But there was vindication too. The whistleblower reward was substantial. 15% of the recovered funds. More than I'd made in 5 years of killing myself for scraps of recognition. And there were other rewards. "Ms. Hunt?" Richard Blackstone found me in the break room a month after Craig's termination. "I owe you an apology." I waited, saying nothing. "You tried to build something exceptional with Osprey. We failed to protect your work, and we failed to listen when you raised concerns." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The board has authorized me to offer you a position. Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives, your own team, your own projects, direct reporting to the C-suite. It was everything I'd wanted, everything I'd fought for, everything that should have been mine from the beginning." "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I need to think about it." His surprise was genuine. "May I ask why?" I thought about how to explain that watching Craig fall had shown me something crucial. The system that had elevated him, that had ignored me, that had required federal intervention to acknowledge fraud, that system was still in place. They were offering me a seat at a table I no longer wanted to join. "Because I've learned that sometimes the best position to play from isn't inside the game," I said finally. 2 weeks later, the offer was still on the table. So were 3 others from competing firms who'd heard about the analyst who'd saved investors millions by exposing fraud. My inbox filled with messages from women across the industry, sharing their own stories, asking for advice. I sat in my apartment, financial projections spread before me, not for Amerlinks or any other corporate giant, but for something new. A consulting firm specializing in forensic analysis and corporate compliance. My first clients were already lined up, companies wanting to avoid their own Osprey disasters. The doorbell rang. Malik stood outside with champagne and Chinese takeout. "Heard Craig got 18 months minimum," he said, settling onto my couch. "Federal prison, no country club facility for him." "Good," I said, and meant it. "So what now? You taking Blackstone's offer?" I showed him my business plan instead. His whistle was low and appreciative. You're really walking away from corporate? No, I corrected. I'm walking above it. Let them play their games. I'll be the one making sure the games have rules. We toasted to that, to new beginnings, to justice served, to the sweet satisfaction of costing those who'd cost us so much. Outside my window, Denver glittered in the darkness. Somewhere in this city, Craig Darnell was learning what it meant to be truly powerless. Somewhere, other women were documenting their own stolen work, building their own cases, and somewhere, in a small apartment filled with business plans and possibility, I was finally free. I submitted my resignation on a Monday morning, exactly 6 months after Craig stole Osprey. No 2 weeks' notice, no apologetic explanations. Just a clean, professional letter stating my last day would be Friday. Margaret caught me cleaning out my desk. So it's true? You're leaving? Time for something new, I said, packing the few personal items I'd allowed myself. She studied me with eyes that had seen decades of corporate warfare. You know, in 30 years here, I've never seen anyone play the game quite like you did. I didn't play their game, I corrected. I changed it. The farewell emails were revealing. Some colleagues who'd ignored me for years suddenly discovered my value. Others, Craig's loyalists, maintained their cold silence. But the messages that mattered came from the shadow network, the women who'd helped me build my case. You showed us it was possible, Sarah wrote. I've started documenting everything. 3 of us are filing complaints next week. Linda from IT added, the boys' club is over. My last day at Amerlinks, I stood in the lobby, visitor's badge in hand. I'd returned to collect my final paycheck and SEC whistleblower reward confirmation. The number still made me dizzy, $765,000. More than enough to launch my new venture. Ms. Hunt? A young woman approached, maybe 25, fresh-faced and eager. I'm Jessica, just started in strategic development. I wanted to thank you. For what? For showing me that we don't have to accept their scraps. Her voice dropped. I've already started keeping records, just in case. I smiled, seeing myself 6 years ago. Document everything, trust your instincts, and never, ever let them convince you that your silence is professionalism. Austin. Texas welcomed me with sunshine and possibility. I'd chosen it deliberately. A tech hub with a growing financial sector, far enough from Denver to be a fresh start, close enough to maintain my network. My new apartment had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Colorado River, paid for in cash. Hunt Financial Forensics opened 3 weeks later. A small office in a converted Victorian, just me and 2 junior analysts I'd poached from firms that had undervalued them. Our first client came through Rebecca from EchoNet, a tech startup whose CFO suspected his partner was cooking books. We found $2.3 million in diverted funds within a week. Word spread. By month 3, we had more clients than we could handle. Companies wanting fraud audits, investors needing due diligence, boards requiring independent verification. Every check that cleared was vindication. Every case we cracked was a small victory against the Craigs of the world. You built this from nothing, Malik said, visiting from Denver. He whistled at our client list. Some of these are Fortune 500s. I built this from everything they tried to take, I corrected. Turns out, knowing how the game is rigged makes you very good at catching the cheaters. A year after leaving Amerlinks, I was invited to speak at a Women in Finance conference. Standing at the podium, looking out at 200 faces, I saw my story reflected in their eyes. I spent 6 years being invisible, I began. Accepting crumbs, swallowing pride, believing that if I just worked harder, proved myself more, they'd finally see my value. I was wrong. The room was silent, absorbing every word. They saw my value perfectly. That's why they stole it. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed, so I stopped trying to fix it from within. I burned it down and built something better from the ashes. The applause was thunderous. Afterwards, woman after woman approached with their own stories. The assistant whose boss published her research under his name, the analyst whose strategy saved her firm millions but got her a 2% raise, the director who watched men she'd trained promote past her. What do I do? They all asked. Document everything, I told them. Build your network, know your worth, and never forget. The best revenge isn't destruction, it's success they can't steal. 6 months later, an envelope arrived with the Colorado Department of Corrections seal. Inside, a single sheet of paper covered in tight handwriting. Kara, I hope you're satisfied. You destroyed my life over petty jealousy. I gave you opportunities, mentored you, and this is how you repaid me. Enjoy your moment. It won't last. Craig. I read it twice, then fed it into the shredder. His opinion had mattered once. Now it was just noise from a man who'd learned too late that actions have consequences. My phone buzzed. 3 new client inquiries, 2 speaking requests, and a message from a reporter at the Wall Street Journal wanting to profile the woman who cost her firm millions to save investors billions. I declined the interview. My story had never been about fame or vindication through public recognition. It was about something simpler and more powerful, refusing to be erased. That night, I sat on my Austin balcony, watching the sun set over the river. My company was thriving. My network grew stronger daily. The Craig Darnells of the world were learning to look over their shoulders, wondering if the woman they'd dismissed was taking notes. I raised my wine glass to the empty air, toasting the women still fighting in offices across the country. The ones documenting fraud, preserving evidence, building cases. The ones who'd learned what I'd learned, that sometimes the only way to win a rigged game is to flip the entire board. The Texas sky blazed orange and purple, full of promise. Somewhere in a federal prison, Craig was learning what it meant to be truly powerless. Somewhere in Denver, Amerlinks was still recovering from the crater he'd left behind. And here in Austin, I was building an empire on the foundation of everything they'd tried to steal. I didn't destroy the company. I just returned to them the true cost of dismissing the truth. Sometimes, justice doesn't come from the law. It comes from the unwavering strength of a woman who's been robbed of her due. The best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with documentation, determination, and the sweet satisfaction of success they can never claim as their own. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you, wherever you are. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to connect with you all. If you enjoyed this corporate revenge tale, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Have you ever experienced something similar in your workplace? I'd love to hear your story too.